Yo, before we start the video, increase that playback speed so you can learn this a lot faster. Yo guys, we're back with part 2 of the budgeting program. So all we're going to be doing is messing with the numbers and doing some calculations. So I've already written out the code, so let's go ahead and take a look. Alright, so every function above this commented line is what we covered last time in part 1. So if you don't know what this code is doing generally, go take a look at that video. And I'm going to do the same as last video, not go in super detail, but just explain the concepts behind all this. Alright, so we have a function get budget report, and this is just going to give us a bunch of numbers after it does calculations. So we're finding the total income and expense, we're finding the average income and expense, and this is over every node given, so it's not over a time frame like per month or per year. It's just what's the average node consist of. And then we have, this should be cash flow, not case flow. There we go. So that's how much profit you're making or how much debt you're going into. And then we have the expense ratio, which is just total expense divided by total time. Okay, so cash flow, like I said, total income minus total expense. Yeah. And then I have 4 functions that I had to make for this. So I had a find total income, find total expense, find average income, and find average expense. And then for the find total income, all we have to do is pass in this vector. And this is pretty neat. Since we're passing it in to this function, we can just pass it directly from this function into this sub function. So let's go take a look at these. Alright, this is debug, so we can get rid of it. So I'm setting a total as a float, and then I'm doing a for loop for the size of the vector, because the size of the vector relates to how many income nodes there are. And then I just add the amount received, because remember, this is a class, so for each element in the vector, we just call the member variable amount received, and that is a float. And then we return the total as a float. And that's the same for the total expenses. It just uses a different vector. Okay, and then for the find average income, we pass in the total amount and the number of nodes, which if we look here, we actually found that using the function I just went over. So we set that to a variable, and then we can just pass it directly, and that's what we did. And then for the number of nodes, because when you're finding an average, you do the total over how many elements you added up. So this is just the vector size. So in this function, all we do is total divided by num nodes, so it's super easy. And then same thing for the expenses. And then if we take a look in our main, first off, we added that get budget report as number 7. So we came down here in the switch and added it. Yeah. The only problem that I was running into was that every time I added a new added to an existing expense or existing income, it would go back to the initialization of the list of nodes. And since we're using a vector, and if we take a look at that function, yeah, here it is. No, that's not. Yeah, it is. So what it would do is go in each file and push each node element into a vector. So what would happen is every time I called this function, add existing income, it would add something to the file, and then it would initialize the list of nodes, because I wanted to make sure I added this new node into the vector. So I just call this function but it would basically double everything that was already in there because it already contained everything that was previously in the file, and it went back and did it again plus the one I just added. So that wasn't good. My solution to this was to create this function called clean vector, and there's a pre-existing method for vectors called clear. So I just passed in both the node vectors and cleared both of them, so their size was set to 0, and then it came back to this function and reread all the files. Alright, so I guess we don't have any expenses or income. Alright, let's go ahead and add some stuff then. So now if we get a budget report, all of these numbers come up. We only have one node in each income and expense. So remember, we put in 225, and then average is 225 because there's only one node. It divides by 1. And then cash flow is income minus expense, 175, and then expense ratio is that. So you could definitely add more functions to this, but I think these are the main ones that people should be looking at when they go over their finances. Another thing we could do with this program is give the user the option to delete certain expenses or incomes, whether that be the category or just a specific node, in case they made a mistake or something. That's really feasible. I'm not going to do it because that's just going to take time, and I'll leave that to you to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. All the source code is in the description. I highly encourage you to try this yourself. It'll definitely teach you a lot about file streams, that's for sure. Alright, thanks for watching.